Okay, so let me introduce, if I may, Rebecca Crankshaw, who is in the cast, Yuan Lewis, who directed the show, and also is the artistic director of the Barn, Councillor Joe Harris, local dignitary, Reverend Gary Green, local dignitary, there in the center, Gary Summers, Sarah Hanley, Jack Bentz, and Sophie May Wake. Did I get that right? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you all for joining us. Okay, so... and another thing that I often say to these, at the start of these Q&As is for those of you involved in the production, when we are talking about things specific to the creative process or the play, obviously you know the work a lot better than we do, so if you think we're missing something key, just steer us in the right direction. But I do want to first, gosh, that's low, address head-on one of the things that has been promoted on social media today around this particular discussion. So let's get straight to the point on that. Let me get my glasses on. Yeah, so I know there's going to be a lot to talk about in terms of the subjects in the play, the incredible production, the technical feats achieved here, and some beautiful performances, by the way. But this production has caused a bit of controversy since it first started last Saturday, and that is around some of the language in the piece. So I think that, sorry, I think they've just taken my dog out. Sorry, she was not offended. Sorry if she was disturbing anyone. So I think that's really important that we talk about that. And just to set a little bit of context, I mentioned that this play is by a playwright called Simon Stevens. There are a few of you who are familiar with Simon Stevens. For those of you who aren't familiar with him, Simon Stevens is one of our leading living British playwrights. He has written over 30 plays, most of those original works that have been staged at many, many plays at the Royal Court Theatre, the National Theatre, the Royal Exchange, the Young Vic, really flagship institutions. He is also, so many of his own plays, he's also adapted many classics by Chekhov and Ibsen and the like, and some very well-known adaptations, including the stage adaptation of Mark Haddon's Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, for which he won Best New Play at both the Olivier Awards and the Tony Awards. So, pretty amazing to have his work seen on this stage. This play is one of his earlier works. So I think it was about his fifth play, and it premiered in 2003. So before we get into the controversy, I first would like Yuan to tell us why you chose this play, and particularly why you chose it to follow something like The Secret Garden, which is a very, very different piece.
Straight away, I'm a huge Simon Stevens fan, so to get your hands on any one of his works is an honor to sort of put on. But after The Secret Garden, which was our sort of ramp up to having a new professional theatre in Cirencester, and I was incredibly proud of the work that we did on The Secret Garden. But I think that where theatre is going and the general sense of where does theatre fit in the entertainment world, we needed to make a statement in Cirencester. We needed to make a statement very soon on into sort of my run as being artistic director here, and we couldn't do another Secret Garden. Probably can't do another Secret Garden until probably Christmas time now, because otherwise people are we're going to run out of musicals. So we're going to run out of small-scale musicals that are family-friendly, because there aren't that many of them that we can afford to put on in a small theatre with only 200 seats. And also, I'm a huge, huge believer in the power of theatre more than just a source of escapism and entertainment. And this audience here isn't used to work like 1 minute, so I'm actually not surprised about the controversy, because I think most people turned up this week to see a piece of theatre to be entertained. And in my opinion, it's an incredibly entertaining piece of theatre, but it is challenging. There are lots of gaps in the story, because that's what Simon Stevens wrote. That's what was meant to happen. Any questions you have, that's the point. And I think that to be able to put on this type of work and to challenge our audiences so they all walk out and think and go, why do I feel this way? Why am I feeling uncomfortable? That was the point. And, you know, this is the first one, but there will be many pieces of theatre like this, and there'll be many pieces of theatre that are more accessible and more family-friendly. A good theatre, a good producing house, or a good regional house will give you that broad spectrum, and I think 1 minute was the perfect choice to get this kicked off.
Okay, great. So just to share some data with you, I found myself going through the script today to just count how many, if I may say it, how many fucks there are in the script, and how many shits. There are 48 fucks and 11 shits. That's all. And mainly they're said by Jack Benz.
No, I'm sure Jack added another 48 to it, to be honest.
Yeah, and indeed, the majority of them are expressed by Robert, Jack's character, and also some by Sarah's character. And a huge concentration in the scene where Robert is drunk and very angry and frustrated. So I want to just bring the actors into it at this point. So you guys have a huge amount of credits on stage and screen, varied work, many things that you've done already that are in contemporary settings. Do you think that this is an abnormal level of swearing in a piece?
No. This is life, you know? It's we're living in the 21st century where things are happening every day, where sometimes we just need to say fuck, and that's life, you know. And to shy away from that wouldn't be real or truthful. Okay, maybe not every household says bad language, but you know, you turn on the TV or you watch a film and it's fuck shit. You know, lots of bad language happening, and it's just, it can be a way of, you know, really making your point.
I think there's something interesting that I found about this. I knew this question was coming up tonight, so I was thinking about it today. Simon Stevens is a wordsmith. So every word that he writes, he chooses with care. You know, 6 fucks in a row notwithstanding, you know. And something that, there's a moment in the piece which is very interesting when Jack's character, Robert, is having a conversation in the police station, and he starts to talk about packies. And Gary calls him on it, and he says, it's just a word. That is his answer. Now, the point of that, to me, is to show the power of a word. And for me personally, that is the word that stands out in this piece to make me go, you know, that isn't a word that I don't hear. There's a reason I don't hear that. I hear fucks and shits and cunts around the place all the time. That's how modern people speak. And I think that is there for a reason, and he drops that in there for a reason to make us think, what are words? What do they mean? Why are they there? And what is their power?
Jack, do you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, it depends on the story you're... it depends on the story you're telling as well, because like a lot of modern day London things, or it's like how youth talk and that, obviously if there were 500 fucks said in the secret garden, it probably wouldn't be appropriate, because that's not the story you're telling. But certain stories need to be like articulated like that, because of, you know, that's real life as well. And things like I love Guy Ritchie films and like Lock, Stock and Snatch. I think it can, like, bad language like that can be used to enhance a script. If it's used as just a replacement for scripts, like as in it's there for no reason, if it's just, I'm just saying fuck because I've got nothing better to say, well then there's no point to it. But like Rebecca was saying, Simon Stevens is a wordsmith, and so bad language I think can be used to articulate, a thing, a feeling, and like I say, it's not always appropriate. If you're doing something set, I don't know, maybe in an old people's home in like a really leafy suburb or something like that, you might want to tone down the sheer level of fucks you shall project. But when it's appropriate, it's, you know, it can be used because it's truthful. That's just my humble opinion.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with what they said, but I mean, I think on maybe the first or second day I said to Cranky, I think people will walk out of this.
By the way, I'm Cranky, not because I am, it's my surname. Just so you know.
And I think also it's worth noting that Simon does have two characters call out the other characters for
Indeed.
swearing. Yeah. So Gary, you tell Robert that he's swearing too much, and Sophie, you tell Sarah's character that she's swearing too much.
But Gary also gets a C-bomb a couple of times. So as much as he says, you swear too much. Yeah.
And just on the point of on the wordsmith, I mean, again, people who know contemporary playwrights will be familiar with it, but there are other playwrights who are very well known for this kind of language. David Mamet, Mark Ravenhill, goodness me, Irvin Walsh's Train Spotting, we'd be in trouble. But Simon Stevens is not a playwright that you know, as you said, that is known for an unnecessary or excessive level. So it is appropriate to the script. He commented on this himself today on Twitter. He was responding to some comments, and he said, I think it could be, he said it so eloquently, I'm not going to read it here, but he said, I think it could be argued that a young cop investigating a child abduction would resort to language beyond the normal discourse, is what he said.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's hear some dissenting voices. Has anyone in the audience been offended by the language in the play? Anyone? No one knows.
They already left.
They all left.
I told you.
Okay, yes?
No bad language in it at all, but I did feel it being a bit close to perhaps getting a little bit too much for the sake of it. That was my feeling. But maybe it's a deliberate shock tactic, I don't know. I'm actually a bit more offended about what's being said on the panel about it, like this is like everything else. You know, that's the thing, you've got sensibility. It's not like for a lot of people, and therefore I don't think it's offensive. In that sense, but I think there's to be a bit greater understanding that if you want to bring people into a play like this and they're not expecting it because they've just seen The Secret Garden, you can't just say, well, it's just live, because that isn't reasonable for them.
Of course.
And perhaps that maybe for us in the theatre, we're used to that sort of language, or if you're in London or whatever, some people aren't used to it. So language warnings, perhaps when you have a discussion about, you know, we did Billy Elliot, the youth theatre version 5 years ago. They took all the bad language out apart from one word that the grandma said. So we put a disclaimer in outside. We still had somebody complaining about that one word. So for some people, you know, 48 executives are going to be too much. For somebody else, one is too much. But a disclaimer might have been appropriate. I don't know, but I don't know.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Did you carry a warning, by the way?
Yeah, we did. We had them on all the signs outside, and we have them on the website. But again, I agree with you. I think the beautiful thing about theatre and entertainment and about sort of modern society is that we all have an opinion, and I value, and the theatre, the ethos of this theatre within our staff and our creative teams and our casts is that everyone's opinion is absolutely valid. And I think that, you know, that we very clearly, when we invited guests to see this play in the early stages of the run, we stated that it was for sort of an adult audience, and it was at their choice if they wanted to bring sort of, you know, 14, 15-year-olds. I think we've got some young girls down the front here. I think every time that I go and see a play, I definitely do my research. I'll definitely look into it, and I think that probably most people in this area do the same, and I totally respect. And actually, I was glad that people wanted to debate this on social media, because it's really important that we all share our opinions. I think the problem is that these people who have made their points on social media maybe haven't turned up tonight, because that would have been lovely to sort of get that side of things, because as a fledgling organisation, the theatre, we want to learn so that we can sort of develop together, develop a new theatre audience, and also develop as an organisation.
And I also just want to say again, thank you for sharing. That was really an honest and helpful response. So let me bring in now our guest speakers here. Councillor Joe, were you surprised by some of the responses to the piece?
Yeah, so I'm quite lucky. I haven't seen it yet, so I've still got all of this in store. So I'm quite looking forward to it, and I probably won't be bringing my grandma like I was going to. So no, we'll see on that one. But no, listen. I think I'm in politics, and part of my role is being very polite to people. It's just the nature of the role. And what I've certainly discovered, I think certainly about the Cotswold and the Cotswold audience, and maybe a Cirencester audience, is there is quite often that shock and that awe. And I think actually it's testament to what a lovely area Cirencester and the Cotswolds is to grow up, because we are sometimes, I think, slightly detached from the gritty reality of what this play is about, and what other people who live elsewhere have to go through in their daily lives. In terms of the swearing, I'm really thrilled that actually this has sparked a debate, and we're not talking about the curbs in the marketplace anymore, because we needed to move on from that. But I think certainly I think it is a generational thing. I really, really do. I think my generation in particular. I'm 25 now. Most of my friends that I quite often swear in front of wouldn't think twice. Certainly my older colleagues that I work with, occasionally I might mutter the F word. I'm a politician, I'm not allowed to swear in public, am I? So, you're on
social media.
Hang on. Social media is a really interesting one as well, because I think it certainly has opened the floodgates. Some of the bile and the bad language that myself, that I'm subjected to from angry residents, it's totally unacceptable, and it's actually quite it can be quite upsetting. But no, I think it is refreshing to have this debate. Actually, I think I use a lot of bad language, but I wouldn't use it in public. I wouldn't use it with people that I'm dealing with. I do have one very funny anecdote. Actually, I used to be the mayor of Cirencester, as some of you will know, so I used to get invited to lots of posh dinners, very nice. And there was one, I'm not going to tell you which group it was, because I don't want to embarrass her. But I was sat there having dinner. It was a very posh, very formal, very nice. And I'd had a bit to drink. There's quite a lot of free wine flowing. And a chap walked in, and just completely out of the blue, I just said, "Oh, I can't stand that bloke. He's a bit of a twat, isn't he?" And then the woman next to him, the woman next to me was like, you'd never have guessed it. Lovely older woman. She said, "Oh, it's all right. I thought he's had cock for years."
Sometimes the word perfectly expresses what you're feeling.
But no, certainly, just rounding up, I don't swear in public terribly often. I do in my social life, but I think the key point for me is I do think it's a generational thing. I think my generation certainly probably wouldn't blink twice. And I just think, noting the comments that we got in the local press and about this country, and equally on your show here, it does seem to be a generational thing. I guess that'd be my main observation.
I want to bring Gary in, but just before, Yuan, would you ever consider editing a script before putting it on here?
Simon Stevens would have his guts for garters. I'm just saying that right now.
Yeah, I don't think Simon Stevens would allow it, but
I wouldn't have picked the piece if I ever thought that I needed to edit the playwright's words, to be honest.
I was going to say censor, but yeah.
No, I think it's, I watched this in the same, we were talking about it earlier, and I watched this play and the situation and the context of this play. I just see characters, I see the situation. I don't hear the specifics of the language, because I think that language is appropriate to the situation.
It's also, given that the piece is about inarticulacy, that's a hard word to say, the inarticulacy of grief, expletives are often what we turn to when we can't put into words what our feelings are.
I was going to say exactly that same thing.
Thank you, Rebecca. But let's bring Gary into this now.
Well, I'm a real Gary, first and foremost. Are you a real Gary? Fantastic. And I'm certainly not allowed to swear as a vicar. But I do sometimes, I confess, And I think we've got to put our debate into the context of the story, because I was really challenged and I was really quite moved by the whole story, actually, because I deal with grief a lot. And I have to deal with it, not every day, but I come alongside people who are suffering. And they're often suffering at a certain point in that whole cycle of grief. I'm not going to go through it with you, but I could see every level of that cycle of grief in this play. From the guilt, to the bargaining, to the anger, all the way through to getting through it. And actually, at our low points, exactly what you said, those pressure valves burst. And we don't know how to respond. We don't know really what to say sometimes. I don't know what to say sometimes. I just listen, and I'm alongside people. And we build the most strange relationships in those times with others who will understand us, or we hope will help us to understand what we're going through. And this is a story about grief. Actually, a little girl is lost. She disappears. And all the characters, they can't handle it. The police officers can't find her. And they're actually suffering from their own grief, aren't they? You want to go to the Isle of Man, and with your wife, although you're getting a bit friendly with
Catherine.
My new wife.
And actually, if you look at every single character, they've got something of grief.
Yeah.
There's something about belonging, there's something about moving away, there's something about actually not being able to finish anything and loneliness. And all of these things are part of that horrible grief cycle which we will all experience at some point in our life. Sometimes swearing helps us not to do something else. And that something else can be really dangerous, not just to our health, but to maybe others. It could lead to violence. It could actually lead to ourselves taking our own life. Now, I've had to deal with people who've done that. So this is real. This play is real. Now, as a parent, I do not encourage my children, one of which is here, to swear. Although he'll tell me, but Dad, sometimes in the car, you take your dog collar off. It happens, because we're all human. But those are release valves. And I certainly wouldn't want to show that release valve in someone else, to someone else who I'm ministering to. But maybe something Joe said, we're maybe not used to hearing that so much, in the Cotswolds, in Cheltenham, where I'm a vicar. But it's there. It's there for all of us. And I don't think swearing is anymore something which we can associate with class or social upbringing or education. It's actually crept into the vernacular. You would be surprised, I seem to count them in my head, the number of people who actually use the word Christ a lot. And I often think, we praying, are we? But that one has crept in, and that's okay now. I think if there was a lot of Christs in this play, nobody would have batted an eyelid. Yeah? The F word's becoming more prevalent. If any of you have seen Game of Thrones, well, that's a journey into expletives, isn't it? But it's powerful. So I think my point is that in these fractured lives in which we all live and sometimes dip into, there are release valves which need to be tweaked. Perhaps we're using the expletives a bit too much and actually using it to make points. So maybe the next question is it now part of our natural conversation and it actually is used to make a point?
Well, that could be the next question. We'll see. But that's brilliant. Thank you very much. I do just want to... It's a shame that I'm going to come to you in a moment. It's a shame that some of the people who've shared these comments online weren't able to come tonight for whatever reason. But I would just... I think it's appropriate to share some of what they've said. So there have been complaints that the swearing is excessive, unnecessary, offensive, vulgar. One comment was, if you can't write without all that swearing, you shouldn't write at all. So I'm sure Simon Stevens has a thought about that.
Well, Simon actually quoted that exact thing on his Twitter today, so I think he's taken it with a bit of tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah. Yes, there was a hand here.
I just want to say, it is like, it's empathy life in Cirencester. I've got 2 teenage boys who were brought up in Cirencester. They swear all the time. I don't like it, but they do it. I do it. 95% of people do do. Maybe if you don't, you don't, but that's your choice. In the play, the fucks, the shits did not stand out. The word packy did. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
For the reason it was meant. I was brought up in Glasgow. The word packy. But the political correctness and stuff of today, you wouldn't obviously say it, so that's why it was used in that way in this play. Maybe it wasn't written then, but that's part of it. That's why it stands out. But not one of you said anything wrong about why that language is used tonight at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hand here.
A point about, there's another Simon Stevens play called I'm Sure of the Wide World.
That was about a year before this one.
Quite similar, it's about the loss of a young child as well. But interesting, because I just picked up on some of the points about swearing being a generational thing. The main swearer in that production is the grandfather, and he swears like a trooper. And I thought what was interesting is not every character in this play swears. It's given to the choice characters and it's part of their character development, I guess. It made them more kind of whole, whereas it's very obvious the characters who choose not to. Like, did your characters swear?
No.
And she's the one who...
Do you think it might also be a class thing with the characters? Actors?
Once. She says shit. Once.
I don't know. I personally, I don't think in this piece that it is a point about class, but I do think that it's a point about the kind of ripples of grief, right? So the person, so yeah, my character is obviously the mother of the daughter that goes, and so she is at the pinpoint and the epicenter of the grief, and yet she never does, almost because it is so extreme what she's hanging on to that she can't go to that place, because if she did, she couldn't go there because she probably wouldn't carry on living. She's so sort of contained, right? And so when I first read this piece, I really thought that it was like Daisy's disappearance is like a stone dropped into a pond, and the ripples that come out of it. And I'm right close to that stone, right in the middle. And as the ripples kind of come out, that is where, people are becoming more inarticulate because it's not their grief. So what do they do? It is mine. So I think it's about that more than it's about class in this piece.
Yes. Gary.
Can I ask just a really quick question? Because one of the things I was really kind of moved about by your character was right at the end in the park, the zoo.
Yeah.
Actually, you kind of dipped into just some feelings of hatred and revenge, didn't you? Right at the end.
Yes, indeed. And it's that thing of underneath it all, yes, I can and I must carry on living, and I do. But yes, there's no forgiveness there.
And my second question is, because I actually was just thinking about this today, knowing I was going to be here this evening, is that each of you has a soliloquy where you talk alone, and suddenly we see the real you. Do you swear during those soliloquies?
Yes.
You do. You don't.
I don't.
Okay, so that's really interesting, because sometimes when we find our own space and are able to talk alone, then actually you see the real us. We're stripped down. And maybe swearing then doesn't factor. This is maybe a very clever script.
It
Pass
is
you
a really
back.
clever.
Yes.
Yeah, I certainly swear. I'm married to a Navy man, and my God, he taught me some new words, I must say. But the one thing that I think I'm right in saying that there wasn't sort of a use of the word in just passing conversation. It was all used in moments of passion, desperation. It wasn't, oh, give me a fucking drink, I need a cigarette, pass me the fucking newspaper. It wasn't gratuitous in that sense.
Yes.
Absolutely
It was
right.
all with emotion. I certainly wasn't offended by it. I mean, your outburst was like, whoa, but I wasn't offended. I was moved by the sort of emotion and the power of that, really.
Thank you. Hold on just a moment. Ben, can you speak up?
Oh, sorry. It's interesting you say about how sort of using it as a passive phrase, because when Jack uses the word happy, it does seem a bit sort of out of place with the rest of it. It seems a bit based around his character, although it's really not. It seems sort of slightly out of place. So it's wondering how difficult it is as a director and as the actor to, in the racial tensions or society we have, to sort of think about using that word in the plays, sort of
Are you trying to keep hold of the dog while you're asking that? Sorry about that. Jack, do you want to answer that first?
I think I would have had more of an issue with it were it not resolved within the context of the scene. Like, if it had been said and it would have gone completely unchallenged, then it's kind of just hanging up there. But because it's shut down, that to me felt like kind of more of a demonstration of why it's not acceptable. It reminded me a bit of, I used to really like the series Life on Mars. I don't know if anyone's it. And that was set in a different time, like in the 70s. And Robert or Philip Glenister's character, I can't remember which, but he'd constantly say things like there'd be an Asian lady in like a sari, and he'd go, oh, well, she'd popped out in a nightie, or something like that. And something that's kind of this real kind of casual racism, or they drop other words. And the way that worked was because John Sims' character would always reference it and either pull him up for it, or there'd be a clear display that, like, that's not what we do anymore. That's not cool. We can't do that now. It wasn't acceptable then, but now in modern society, like, it actively gets stopped. And so for me, it was important that was reflected, and that's why I was okay with using it within the context of the scene and the play.
For me, coming back to your question earlier about whether I would ever consider editing something, it was one thing that I considered, because I then went during the research phase of this play and this development. I've been speaking to one of the heads of the missing people in the Metropolitan Police, and she said that this is incredibly inaccurate for now. It may have been accurate that somebody would have spoken to a senior officer using that word back in 2003, but right now they'd been stricken off straight away, that the rules are so tight on any sort of racial slurs like that the story would have ended then. Robert would have been sacked. So I was thinking, with the sort of bringing this from being set in 2002, I think, when it was written, to being set in 2018, it didn't make sense in the piece. But we had to, again, I think the point of it, as Cranky told us earlier, is that the swearing is acceptable in this. It's when we have racial slurs that is shot down straight away.
Yeah, Joe.
Can I pick up on that point? Because, listen, I wouldn't, swearing, I'm sort of immune to it. I've grown up with it just from school. I think the woman there made a good point about kids using it. Some of the words my little brother, though, they mystify me. And I think you're right there. But I think when it comes to a personal insult, I think that, for me, I find that more insulting. So we've got the whole Brexit thing. I might be described as a snowflake. I personally find that more offensive than being called a see you next Tuesday. And it's a bizarre one. I think when it's personal, it's an attack on you, and it's an attack on. So you mentioned the word Paki. You mentioned. I think when it's a racial slur and it's on somebody's beliefs or their race, I think that's when it's more shocking. Going back to that more general point about swearing, I watch, occasionally I'll catch a bit of EastEnders or Coronation Street. I think they're bizarre because nobody does swear. It's all so sanitised, and the pub's blown up and they're sort of going, oh crikey, it's really bizarre. So I think we're very sanitised, but in summary, I think we're much more perceptive and to personal insults. They don't have to be swear words. I think that's the key point.
I'm going to take a few more comments on this, and then I do want to cover other things. That I actually think the swearing is kind of the least interesting thing about this play and this production. This is a really groundbreaking production, so I want to make sure that we talk about other topics. Yes?
Going back to the writing movement, obviously it's an adaptation of Mark Haddon's work. I've read a couple of his books, and...
This is not an adaptation of Mark Haddon.
No.
Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime was an adaptation that Simon Stevens wrote of that book. This is an original play.
Okay, well there's so much about this that reminds me of Mark Haddon and the way that he describes really awful situations like this, the one about the spot, where he's got cancer and he's trying to deal with that. And the way that he describes it so nitty-gritty and raw, and it's all about how people don't this is just reminiscent of that.
Well, Mark Haddon's a great writer too, so I think that's a compliment for Simon Stevens.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say was that he actually manages to describe grief and all of those things without swearing, and he does it really well and really jerks on the emotions. So I didn't mind swearing, but could it be done without it?
I mean, I think it could be done without it, but the point is it'd be a different play.
Yeah.
So definitely, of course, it's possible to write about grief in entirely different ways. It's such an enormous emotion, an enormous spectrum of emotion that you can write it in whichever way you like. But this particular piece has chosen this angle on it, and so therefore it is here.
And of course, with Curious Incident, it's told from the perspective of the child. So, but yes, thank you for making that point. Yes, gentleman here.
It's a kind of question about swearing, but it's not really, so hopefully that helps. And it's direct to the user.
Who are you pointing at? Jack? Yeah.
Thank you. Because it's sort of occurring to me, and I want to test out this hypothesis, that actually a lot of your character is a smokescreen for a really deep person. So a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about is actually demonstrating how shallow you are, if you like, on the surface superficially. If one can be superficially shallow, bear with me. And the whole point of your anguish later on is the fact that you are actually much deeper than your sweariness gives you credit for. Is that?
But are you suggesting that if somebody doesn't have a great vocabulary, that's a...
Well, suggesting that, I mean, even with the scene up front where you had to be called out, etc., because it's just you were being matey and it was just a word, etc., etc. You're trying to go for the amicable, you're trying to go for the camaraderie, you're trying to sort of make friends that way with your superficial stuff. But actually, that's because you're just a bit backhanded about that, and there's a lot more on the surface that is struggling to get out. Hence the big scene with all the swearing, which is ironic.
Yeah, how I saw it is that, no, I definitely think there's a lot of depth to him, by the very nature of the fact that as the play progresses and we see this time pass, like it's no longer a job. He becomes invested. Like we say earlier, there's no liaison, there's no family liaison, so we're there for all of it. We're not only just the paperwork, but we're there at the grassroots level, experiencing Anne's grief. And so I kind of saw it as, especially like references the fact he's 24, and I think definitely he's really feeling it. He just has this, he doesn't know how to articulate it. He is plumbing this well of emotion that he has no experience of, and he doesn't know how to process it. He doesn't know how to use it in a constructive manner. He's not the kind of guy that would go home and would open up. Like, maybe even if he had a very happy and productive relationship with Esther, I don't think he'd probably know how to go home and really open up. And I think that the problem with that, and from my own like personal grief, I experienced a lot of grief when I was a teenager. If it's not processed and dealt with in a constructive manner, then it becomes toxic, and it becomes like a fire and this way, and it just erupts, and it could erupt in a number of ways. Like we spoke about, it could result in violence, it could result in 48 fucks, it could result in like a lot of different ways, but I think it's not because he's a frivolous character or because he doesn't have that depth. It's because he does not know how to articulate himself, and so it does just erupt out of him. That was how I saw it.
I mean, so to Gary's point, is that all the bull cue?
Sorry, what was that?
Is that all the bull cue?
Yeah.
At one point.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He swears his anguish out.
Yeah.
Okay, were there other comments on this? So yes, sir, just behind.
I drive past this building every day.
You drive past what?
I drive past this building every day, and 10 minutes when I walked in the door, first time I've ever been to the theatre. And it's fantastic, the whole thing. What you brought to Cirencester, I think it's fantastic. I see Joe, I follow Joe on Facebook and Twitter, the crowd just like puts out here. It's diabolical. Facebook and social media, it's so easy for the keyboard warriors to just waffle on, not see it. I'm sorry guys, walk away, ignore it. The passion, what you guys have brought tonight is absolutely fantastic, and I think you have done something good for Cirencester.
So Sorry, can I just add to that as well? Can I just add to that as well, following on from what you said? One of the big things for me coming here and doing this, when Ewan so graciously offered me the part, was the opportunity to be part of something potentially amazing at its inception. We're only the second production here, and a big part of it, as well as the writing, was the fact that the team here, led by Ewan, are so fantastic. They're young, they're hungry, they're passionate, and they just want to bring theatre and tell stories, get people talking, and make something really special. And we're in this stunning building.
State of the art.
State of the art. I mean, as you all heard and have seen, the projection and the sound is amazing, but the people at the core of it are so incredible. And I'm really glad that you appreciate what that is here.
So this is your first but not your last visit. Fantastic. But thank you for that comment. And yes.
Sorry. When I first met Ewan and we talked about this, he was doing this play, I said, you've opened this regional theatre. This is when you do like an old coward, right? Or you do something else. And he was like, well, that's the total opposite. And I wonder whether or not someone like yourself, sir, who came tonight, whether or not if it had been a sort of piece like an old coward piece or something, you might have perhaps been more alienated by it and thinking that there's a bunch of people here who go to see those sort of plays all the time who you maybe are not feel part of that group. And it's really nice you come to see a play that isn't perhaps a traditional thing that would have been on here. And I'm glad you came, and I hope you feel included in something that's new and something that's not the standard run-of-the-mill regional theatre piece.
Yes.
Sorry to bang on, but I think the key to the success of this place is going to be making sure that everybody, regardless of class, I hate that word, is involved. And I think certainly when we met, we had a bit of a meal, didn't we, next door? You showed me around just before you guys opened, and that was one of the key things I was seeking, is to ensure that it is open to the public, and ensuring that in the area that I represent, those kids who are perhaps not as well off, maybe living on some of our estates, are included as well. And I'm really pleased that making that undertaking and just throwing it open to the whole community. So good on you.
Fantastic. So I'm going to take a little bit of what you said and move on to some of the interesting aspects of the production. This show, the story is set in London in 2001. Before we had social media as we have now. You've updated it to 2018, and you have used the state-of-the-art facilities that you have here at the barn to create a phenomenal world. Wouldn't you agree? So, Yuan, can you first of all tell us a little bit about why you wanted to bring social media into it and how that inspired the design decisions?
The big thing for me was that this piece, since it was written, we've seen these stories of a daisy going missing in the world, and we've seen sort of the media sort of take over and the media hype that happens, and just with cases like Alice Gross and Madeleine McCann, we've seen how we've almost the world has changed to when Simon wrote this piece, and that there was that extra character that we could add into this piece by bringing social media into the world and digital media, and we see these harrowing images of Dr. Anne Schultz just watching the news at the back of the stage, just hoping that her daughter is found at the back, and or whether it's scrolling through tweets and just seeing, because everyone now has a voice, everyone now has an opinion. This whole debate this evening has been born out of the fact social media has a place, it's a character in every one of our lives, and I felt that was really important to make this piece relevant, and it's already relevant, but I felt that would sort of bring it right up to date.
So, yes, I'm going to bring you into it, but first I want to know the design itself. How much work went into that?
A huge amount, and actually we changed the designs multiple times, and I guess what we've ended up with, in a really roundabout way, I'll give you a brief on how this kind of was created. Have you seen sort of the diagram of the 6 degrees of separation? It's all sort of polygons which we projected at one point. I was looking at this and thinking how it was we were based very heavily in London, and how it was very important that it was obvious from the get-go that we were in London and this is a very London story. And I was looking at these shapes and thought, this is the London Underground map here. And then very quickly my head moved into that we must set this in the London Underground. And then suddenly we ended up with these circles, which is the tube, and it sort of then became very claustrophobic, and we've actually made the space smaller, so the guys have to act on top of each other the whole time. But it also then gave us this beautiful depth to play with the projection and everything, and it just, again, it was a mad way of getting there, but that's where it all came from, really.
For those watching on Facebook Live, it may appear that this is a fairly simple monochrome set, but I assure you that is not the case. This has some of the most sophisticated video projection that I've seen, and so well integrated with the performances. And something that PJ McAvoy, who designed this and The Secret Garden, refers to as the aperture effect.
The aperture, yes, yeah, the iris at the back of it, yeah, for sure. But a big PJ did an amazing job on this, but a huge well done, and thank you has to go to Ben Collins. I think he's up there somewhere. Where is he? Who is his dad and his mum are right there in the first few rows. And Ben has done how many all-nighters to get the videos right for this? So all those beautiful shots of London in the monologues that you saw, all the work on the movies, anything that moved, basically, that was Ben, and he's a local boy, and I think it's amazing this theatre is creating new local creative talent as well.
So, Rebecca, you wanted to comment on social media, and then I wanted also, after that, for the actors to talk about going to London and filming those sequences and then acting opposite them.
Yeah, it was just a quick thing, really, that I think there was something else clever about your decision to update and bring the social media in. Is obviously, you know, the missing child disappears, but also we all disappear into social media, right? So you know, Sophie's character is lonely and desperate, even though she's surrounded by it, and so that feeling of kind of us all sinking, beneath the weight of it, is such a part of the play, and made so much sense too, I thought.
Yeah. Gary, Sarah, Jack, Sophie.
Sorry.
What would you like to add to that about
about the social media side?
Yeah, about social media and/or filming the sequences in London.
Oh, yeah. To be honest, something funny the other day. I mean, I was just earlier on was just like, what plays behind me when we're doing those things? Because to be honest, I haven't watched a huge amount. It was nice doing it in London. It was like the warmest day of the year, and we were trying to pretend it was winter. And so you see us wearing like a big coat while someone walks past in a bikini, you know, or I walk past in a bikini and someone else wearing, I don't know. But yeah, filming in London was great, and I think part of the social media stuff is, I mean, I don't want to say too much about the past of this play, but I think some of what the projections have been able to do is fill in some gaps, because there are gaps in this piece, and I think it makes it, I think it's easier to digest with with the stuff that Ewan and the other guys have come up with, to fill in some of the things which aren't written there by Simon. But I think it's been useful to tell a whole story.
I think filming in London really made me realise what my character Catherine is going through, and how big and massive London is. The population alone is huge, and for this young girl, 21, very young, naive, and dealing with a lot of, when we see her alone in her monologue, she doesn't swear, and she's very vulnerable, and she feels alone and very hopeless, I think. You know, that line, there are no stars in the sky and I can't find the moon. That to me, that is someone who is at her end. She is so lost. It's blackness to her in what she sees. And when I was filming in London, it really made me, we were walking around and I was like, Oh, yeah, poor Catherine. And I suppose as an Irish girl myself, coming over, training in England, I could totally relate with her. And yes, she does use a lot of swearing, but I was really thinking about this. Sorry to go back to this. I was really thinking about it. And yes, she does swear a lot, but it is mainly always with Gary. And maybe she's trying to be cool. It's a front. And then with Mary Louise, you know, she maybe she has her eye on her, and she's a little more. We adapt. The people we're around, we adapt. You know, I might not swear in front of my parents. Jesus, they'd kill me. But you know, around the people, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, you adapt, and trauma as well is a huge thing, and a huge part of this piece. And when somebody goes through different parts of trauma, that's what we revert to. We as you say, the pressure point. We can, and for Catherine, I think she's going through her own traumas. Particularly, there's no stars in the sky and I can't find the moon. Oh, it kills me every time. But isn't it better that she is vocalizing how she's feeling? And I think it's a credit to Simon Stevens how he's written it, because she's really able to articulate how she's feeling, and she's at the depths of despair in her soliloquy. And then we see her put that pressure valve go with Gary. She's like, yeah, because she's there, you know, and she's dealing with all this male hierarchy and her boss and all these people that maybe are creeping on her, and she's like, yeah, angry and sad. So yes, sorry, going back to filming in London, it made me realise all those things, because poor old Catherine was going through a hell of a lot.
Yeah, thank you, awesome. I also think your point is a really important one. London is like another character in this play, and this comes across so brilliantly in the projection and the design, but also in those private soliloquies. Each one of you describes a different little corner of the city, and it's done really beautifully, and how you respond to those feelings of alienation. And Jack, as a native Londoner,
just a little bit. Yeah, it's amazing with London as well, like, because it's such a juxtaposition in a sense of, it's like one of the busiest cities in the world, and yet you can feel so lonely as well, you know. There's like, what, 10, 11 million people? That's just on my street. Like, and yeah, you can feel so lonely. And I think that's one of the big things I've noticed with this play, was like this concurrent theme of loneliness, and how we all feel quite desperate at points, and once again that thing of that inarticulacy of it. But yeah, so I think that was a really helpful, one of the things that Ewan and the rest of the guys did so expertly to kind of shine that light, and that, I think, giving that extra dimension to the play. And from the point of view of filming in London, it was really helpful to obviously, because we're mapping out a route or that sort of thing, and to actually walk the route was really helpful. I've got no idea what's going on behind me. I've never seen it, but I trust it's very good. But yeah, so that was really helpful. Funny little thing happened when we got to the bit when we actually got to Kentish Town. Like Gary said, it was one of the hottest days of the year. Got to Kentish Town, and 12 of the muscliest dudes in vests you've ever seen rocked up. And I thought, it's supposed to be winter, we're probably going to have to go again, aren't we? We went again, didn't we, Lewis? Cleared them on. But yeah, it was nice to pop home for a bit. But I love it here, by the way.
Sorry, Dan. I think there's something, I too am a Londoner, born and bred. And I am a passionate Londoner. I adore it. And when Ewan met me to audition for the show, he asked me what I thought of the play. I said I loved it. And one of the things I said was, I love London, and I think this is really about my city. And there was a slight sort of double take, but this isn't kind of the kindest play to London. If you love London, what's going on with it? But actually, I think that there is, particularly in Anne's monologue at the very end, you do get the feeling that, yes, it can be dreadful, yes, it can be lonely, but also there's something magic about the fact that it just carries on. And it's in Gary's too. The river is there, going through it all, and people just, this extraordinary maelstrom of people doing all the things they do actually is life. And it is the sun coming out. It isn't all city hell. It's actually really great too. Yeah. And I think he has it in there. He puts it in there.
Sophie, do you want to add to that?
I found with
with my soliloquy. It's slightly different from all the others. She literally tells you her journey and maps it out. And she starts off with this energy of talking about all the people, all the hustle and bustle around her, going to the theatre, going to the cinema, doing all of this, which she's not doing. She's not with these people, not spending time with these people. Mary Louise is an incredibly lonely character, which is so interesting to play. And in this whole story that she tells in her soliloquy, she starts off by being, I'm fine with this, I'm good, I'm fine. And something seemingly very insignificant happens, and it sets off this snowball effect for her anxiety. And doing the filming in London was interesting because I did walk the exact route, and it was odd because in the video, I don't know if you noticed, but I don't have any handbag, I don't have anything with me, and I felt when I was filming that how odd it is. If you go out without a handbag, you don't have your phone on, you have nothing, and it made me think, gosh, she's this character who goes off and walks. Like she says this in the first scene, she goes, I wanted something to wear that if I went out, I could just run, I could just go. And I feel she's a character that just has to escape her house or wherever she is, and she just walks. And she walks this route and discovers these really interesting things about herself. So like seeing all the children, which is something that she feels not lonely around children. And then something triggers it and they're gone and she's lonely and she's quite desperate again. And I think it was really interesting filming that, and it helped to really find that journey for her, make it real for me as well.
So you've raised another thing that occurs to me that is that PJ, the designer, mentions in the challenges of the design, which is, as well as representing London, you'll again and again in the soliloquies and in his design, it is how do you represent children, missing children. So everyone references different children, not just Daisy Schultz. Like in your soliloquy, it's all the children have gone, and Jack, your character, is considering having a child, or your partner wants to have a child, and Catherine's character is desperate to be a mum at some point. And Gary, I'm not quite sure. It sounds to me like maybe something went wrong and you couldn't have children. Yeah. So in all of them, there are references to playgrounds or kiddies' toys. So did you feel that as a company that you are operating around missing children generally?
Yeah, there was some. I'll be very brief. But we talked a bit about whether or not Gary's wife, that he doesn't have kids. It seems quite clear, but that perhaps there is someone who you'd quite like to have a child with, who isn't Jenny. And he asked that question about her if she'd want to be a mother, and maybe there's a sadness that he could have had a sort of different existence, and we didn't fully explore why he doesn't have children. But yeah, there are children missing in his life, I think.
My character, there's a lot of stuff that we worked out for our characters that you never hear about, which hopefully does come across, but it's what we know. And my character mentions children and babies in every single scene. And it's something that clearly she's obsessive over. And we discussed, why? And, as an actor, you come up with a reason for that character to behave or react in that certain way. So for me, it was really interesting to come up and to discover why she's so obsessive over children and over babies. And I don't know whether I want to tell anyone, actually. It's quite nice to have it as your secret as an actor. And it's interesting to see what the audience members maybe thought is the reason behind why my character reacts the way she is. So maybe I won't say what it is, but it's a really interesting process because it's not written in the words, it's not written in the play, and it's our creative decision. And that's been really wonderful.
I mean, there are, as Gary and others have mentioned, there are a lot of gaps in the script that are open to interpretations by the audience and by the company, including in the script, the opening sequence, all it says is blackout, and then you're in the shop. So that opening sequence in which you suggest the moment that the child disappears is not in the script.
No, none of. Oh,
Projects, yeah. So actually what we get, the words in the script is all that you get, and then the time transitions where you see the movement sequences happening, which were brilliantly movement directed by Sean Hollins, who's a member of Frantic Assembly. He's something to do with Frantic Assembly, which is an amazing company. And that was just an invention that I wanted to find a way of filling in these gaps as we talked about, but I didn't want to add anything to the script as such. So just by using simple movement sequences, hopefully that sort of showed the passage of time and showed the progression of the investigation, showed a little bit into the insight, whether it was Sarah and Sophie's characters developing or the struggle of Robert focusing on the case, but also then being lonely in his bedroom, and actually he was finding solace in his work when he's just sitting on the bed, and many examples of this, and that was the beauty. I think maybe if Simon had been more involved in the production, he might have restricted me slightly more, but I'm glad in a way that I had free rein in Lovely Cirencester to do what I wanted.
Yeah. Oh, okay, a couple more questions from the audience, and then I think we will wind up. Yes, there. So that's very much the movement practitioner you just talked about.
Well, we wanted to show there was 3 main transitions. The first one was January to April, which was everyone in their sort of working day as such. And then the August to November transition was everyone in the mornings. And actually for Dr. Anne, it was getting ready for Daisy's funeral. It was just, and Robert, you see, flossing his teeth and getting ready in the morning. And then the acid trip, as I called it, the night out, was sort of the escapism nightlife, where you do go and try and drown your sorrows, whether it's taking a pill or having a drink. And it's just what we were trying to do is to show grief and how people try to deal with grief in a number of different ways and try to escape from it in different ways. And again, it's the audience's decision whether that night out or glimpses of that night out actually happens, or whether it's just sort of the time transition. This is what between April to August, whether that is what was what literally was going on or not.
We have our own track together, but a lot of the other characters, if you notice, the character of Anne, which Cranky can chat about, I'm sure, isn't in the rave. She's not dancing. She's not, she's actually very, very separate. And Gary's quite in a separate space, and Robert's in a separate space. So it's quite nice to see and to play with putting them all in the same space, but them being in a different headspace.
Yeah. And now some are withdrawing, and then some are like absolute. Like I spent about 10 minutes just roaring, and it's like so. Some are. I suppose how I saw it anyway was like some are really how they not necessarily becoming introvert, but it's like they're being a bit more passive with it, and then characters like mine and some different stuff you were doing, it's a bit more visceral and a bit more raw.
Okay. Final audience question, anyone? Oh, we've got a couple. Can I come back to you, sir, because there's someone who hasn't asked a question yet. Yep.
Use that word visceral, because that's how I heard the F word, the visceral and raw and expression, emotion. I find it so sad that I've referred to this play.
Yeah.
For me, that was a soundtrack to the play.
Yeah.
And without it, I don't think I would have got, and you could communicate to me the raw, visceral emotion that you were feeling. So for me, I thank you, because that was just a major part of the play.
Great.
Thank you. And on the subject of soundtrack, can you just say a word about the music, please?
Yeah, well, it was an amazing, again, investing in local talent. Ben who brought his mate in, Harry Smith from Stroud, and he said, I've got a mate who I think he will write the perfect soundtrack to this piece for you. And I was looking for somebody because I felt that, what you can say in 50 words you can say in a bar of music, and I think that Harry is just the most phenomenally talented young a writer. He was incredible. He was in the rehearsal room for us for most of the process.
He's
And he
a
was-
genius.
Absolute super.
and he was just watching the action, and then he'd pop into the other room and write a symphony for us. And, and he really is. I'm going to put bets on now that guy is going to be the next Hans Zimmer.
Is there somewhere that people can listen to the music beyond the show?
Well, we were actually going to start selling the music on the front there, and I'll give all the money to Harry.
Excellent. I would also like to encourage you, if you haven't already, to get a copy of the program. There's some great pieces in here, including from Yuan, and a wonderful interview with PJ, who talks a lot more about the design and the challenges and the huge team effort that went into it. It's really, really good. Also on the subject of the program, and the final tableau of the production, the birds, where did the birds come from?
So I try to make those birds work. They were in the show, they were out of the show, they were in the beginning of the show at one point, but I felt that sort of you go and sit by the Thames, and it's a London sound, hearing the sort of the gulls on the Thames, and I felt that the disappearance of a young girl, and it just the vanishing into thin air, and just the noise and the visual of it felt right for the piece, and I didn't get as many birds as I wanted in the piece, but
again,
we've got on the poster.
That's very much your decision, not something that is in the script itself.
It's not in the script, no.
I also want to just plug Yuan here. This is incredible that this is the first show he's ever directed. This is his debut as a director.
And this company, which they've been incredibly supportive. Not just the company, the whole Barn Theatre organisation. I think they all took risks, sort of trusting an untested director. I believe I can do anything, but they didn't know that, and I just want to take this moment to say thank you to these guys. They've been absolutely incredible, and it's a pleasure to work with them.
Thank you.
Okay. No, don't. So much clapping. I do just want to get in a couple more things. Yuan, what's next after 1 minute here at the Barn?
So next we have The Rise and Fall of Little Voice. It's a little bit easier on the ear. So that will be opening in July, and it's been directed by Michael Strassen, who is a stalwart of sort of London theatre. So that's going to be fantastic. So I look forward to inviting you all back for that.
And then just quickly for the cast, we've talked a lot about London, we've talked a lot about swearing. Let's end by saying just a couple words each on Cirencester. What's been the highlight of your time in Cirencester so far? You need to sell it to the people watching on Facebook Live that this really is a theatre worth travelling to get to, and to get to it quick. So who's going to go first? Rebecca, you're right next to me. I'm going to pick on you.
Okay, so I'm a bit of a buildings fan, and it's just so pretty, and I love the fact that it's so old and it's Roman, and the stone, the way the kind of stone looks. It's been beautiful weather. The stone soaks up the sunshine. It's just really beautiful, and I love that.
Beautiful, Gary.
Everyone in the garden centre was really fun. That was the nicest garden centre experience I've ever had.
The garden centre, Sarah.
The people are so kind and warm and open. It's like being back in Dublin. It's lovely. It's so generous, and yeah, it's wonderful. And they have the most wonderful charity shops. My God, every week when I get paid, I'm like off to buy new dresses. And well, I tell you, the King's Head have the most wonderful spa and rooftop terrace, and Teatro have like 40 gin options. So I mean, really, I'm just
Teatro
having a
is
wonderful
the
time.
bar and restaurant adjacent.
So Jack's actually got a tick box of all the Teatro gins.
I got myself a little menu from Teatro, and I got a biro, and I've been going through them chronologically, and I'm scoring them. I highly recommend.
And you write things beside them.
I highly recommend the rhubarb one. It's got a lovely zesty twang to it. It's very nice. But yeah, by the end of this run, I'm hoping I will have documented my gin experience. There's been talk of a potential YouTube series, Jack Bent's on gin. That may come to fruition. Well, watch this space.
I'm not sure the people that you've been encouraging down there are actually old enough to drink.
I was looking past our lovely younger friends and into the clearly, not clearly over 18. Not clearly over 18. I love Cirencester. It's really nice. The people are friendly. Jack Bent stops talking. Thank you.
The only talk
Sophie.
about the YouTube series is from Jack Bent. About Jack Bent's YouTube series.
Sophie, what's your Cirencester highlight?
I had a wonderful walk down a disused canal and through onto the meadows, and I was brought up in a town very, very similar to Cirencester but smaller. So this is not unusual sort of territory for me, but it's like coming home, and that's really, really nice for me. But the beautiful countryside, stunning, places to walk your dogs, and lovely pubs as well. We've gone to a few of those. I think it's lovely countryside here.
I'm going to let our guests also say highlight for Cirencester, star attraction.
Well, we miss it. We used to live here and we moved. We really miss it. There's the marketplace.
The marketplace. Councillor Joe?
The sense of humour, because I think if we all didn't have a sense of humour, we'd probably go mad, and probably some of us already have. But no, it's a fantastic place. I've got to say that.
Yeah. And finally, Yuan, tell us, 1 minute continues until?
No, you're really putting me on the spot. Is it in the programme?
16th of June.
It's 1 minute goes until the 16th of June.
16th of June. Okay, now audience, you are our ambassadors for this show and this theatre, so please go forth and tell everyone. It's on here until the 16th of June. Tweet about it, Facebook it, share the video that is on the theatre's Facebook page now. Pick up some flyers. There's some great flyers with the birds in the foyer that you can be passing around. And come again. And then come and see the rise and fall of Little Voice. And finally, keep your applause to the end and then give a really big round for Sophie and Jack and Sarah and Gary and Joe and Yuan and Rebecca. And Ben at the back.
Terry.